less embarrassed. Will share her experience, strength, and hope with us for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until she is finished. It is my great pleasure this evening to introduce our speaker, Jenna. Come on up, Jenna.
Hello, I'm Jenna. I'm an alcoholic. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's a real privilege because I remember coming to this meeting back when it was at Light and Life Church when I first moved here, and some of the same faces are here, but I came shaking like a leaf, and I had a losing fight with pavement for the umpteenth time, so I was like scab from here, like all the way down the chin, so I had like a scab goatee. It was a terrible look, and I still remember that first meeting, and I was just shaking so bad, I was just trying to get through it. And so this meeting's really special to me, to be an actual member, not just somebody coming in to use AA as a place to hang out and get the heat off, but to be a place that I call home. So welcome home to Garrett and Kale and Taylor. It's good to have you guys here. It beats out there, that's for sure. I don't want to spend a crazy amount of time on what it was like, even though I always somehow do, but I'm determined to get sober by like 20 minutes left, so I can tell you some of the good stuff. But I'll do some of the prerequisites, I guess. Well, first, this is one of my home groups, and my other home group is the beginners meeting on Monday nights here at the downstairs room at 5:30, which is a really good meeting, and this one as well. And I have a sponsor who knows she's my sponsor, and she's here tonight on Zoom. Thanks, Kathy. I have sponsees. My sobriety date is March 14th, 2018. And yeah, I'm blown away and so grateful to be here. So a little bit about what it was like. I, like many alcoholics, I grew up in Wisconsin, a little suburb of Milwaukee called Brookfield. And I was one of 4 kids, and 3 out of 4 of us have struggled hard with alcoholism or addiction. So my mom has been through a lot. She's had to almost bury each one of us at varying degrees of our addictions. But thankfully, all of us now are, in this program and taking our seats seriously, which is a real blessing. My brother had fought I guess he's got a year now, but he had pretty much been on his deathbed before age 30 from alcoholism, and that was really terrifying, but I had to fully just lean on faith in this program, even when I felt like that was a lot to put on God and AA and everything, but it never ceases to amaze me. So yeah, I grew up in Wisconsin. I never really had that feeling that people talk about like not feeling like I fit in anywhere, because I played sports, and I felt like kind of like I got along wherever I was planted, and I didn't really feel very alone. I know I didn't really enjoy being alone. I had an older sister, and we shared a room all our lives. We had bunk beds till we were like 18. And so yeah, I always had like a roommate, and I didn't like to be alone. So I kind of relate to that a little bit, but I didn't really have any sort of problems socially. And my circle of friends in high school, late high school, we partied on the weekends, I guess. We'd have like a house party or whatever, but we just, I guess, we're responsible enough to never drink and drive, so we just pulled straws and, took turns or whatever and had designated drivers. And oddly, I had got my first car by circumstance. My dad had told my sister and I that he had this big surprise for us waiting in the driveway, and we got out to the driveway, and it was like a literal dumpster on wheels that was so humiliating. It was it was older than me, I know that, so 80-something. Chrysler LeBaron, just riddled with dents, and we were like, oh my, this is not going to Brookfield East High School. So I was that moment, okay, I'm getting a job and I'll get my own car. So I did that, and because I had my own car and I thought it was all cool, I was proud of that, I just often volunteered to be the designated driver. And that was kind of more important to me, was to see my friends who went to other schools that I couldn't see during the week, and I played soccer all 4 years of high school, and worked really hard with that. I didn't want to get suspended or get in any trouble, and I really wanted to go to the University of Wisconsin when I graduated, so I was focused on those things. And alcohol was kind of like a take it or leave it sort of thing. I remember enjoying it when we went out, and it was a good time, but it wasn't like that, like dependence that I would know later on. My real foray into addictive behaviors, which I didn't know was a thing that I had to worry about, I would have never imagined, but sort of started as a cry for attention from like a philandering high school boyfriend. I started having eating disorder behaviors, and really that just completely consumed me to the point where I was almost dying of anorexia by the time I was 18, 19 years old. And that was really where all those like behaviors and those skills I kind of honed with, like the denial and secrecy, shame, all that stuff. I really got used to that. And I don't know, my mom, I came home from college my first semester, and she took one look at me and like burst into tears and was like, just keep your bags, like you're going somewhere, and threw me in rehab for the eating disorder when I was, I guess, 18. And so I did the in and out with that thing, as I would come to do later with alcohol rehabs, where I would just say the right things and do what they wanted so that I could get out and go back to doing things my way. And after like a second withdrawal from college and time's going by, my friends' lives are moving on, I was kind of quick to see that like this was going nowhere. And so I was like, all right, I'll just stop doing that. But I needed something to put all that anxiety and nervous energy and obsession into. And I was at the #1 party school in the nation, so all the conditions were ripe. And it started as maybe like a semester, but even when I look back on that semester of like excessive partying, it's really pretty abnormal even throughout that. I remember always having friends to like take care of me. I always had like a babysitter or a keeper, you know, and I always took that for granted. Like I'd black out and I'd not know how I got home, so I couldn't even thank the friends that had to like all leave a party to like carry me home, you know, because I just didn't know how I got there. But it was like, oh cool, I'm home. Like, guess it was a good night, you know. Just so self-absorbed and had no idea really how bad it was. And I just kind of thought this was everybody's experience here at school, but it was clear that I was the bad end of the spectrum. There was SOS calls made to my mom and interventions, and that quickly led to more rehab trips, more withdrawals from college, and I always wanted to go right back. It was like, no, this is my life, and I worked hard to get here, and this is just a phase. I always thought it was a phase, you know, even as it went on for years and years. It was just a phase that was gonna pass. I was gonna grow up, you know. And so I'd go to these treatment centers, and it would be people, you know, twice my age at least, who had like lost 20-year careers or their families, and it was impossible for me to see that as like my future. I just thought, that's a different circumstance. This is like me excessively partying in college, and I'll outgrow it. And so I just couldn't relate, and I refused to take any of that as a warning sign. And I just knew when I went back to college that like now, you know, everyone's on high alert. Everyone's in cahoots with my mom. There's like this whole secret society watching me drink. So I'm just gonna need to like take this drinking, you know, secretly. So I was hiding booze, and, you know, I was putting vodka in water bottles to go to the library. And I don't know what drinking when no one's watching looks like for you, but when I think no one's watching, everybody, of course, knew because I was drunk constantly. But I thought I was getting away with it. But yeah, me drinking without anybody stopping me or trying to intervene was like 24/7. I became like fully physically dependent on alcohol. I was shaking like a leaf in the morning. So like to go to classes and stuff, I was drinking in the morning. If I couldn't like drink enough, even if I was still drinking, I would get alcohol withdrawal seizures often if I just couldn't keep up with myself. And that was when I was like 21, 22, and I still thought like this is a temporary condition, you know? Like I still thought there was all these like life-related prerequisites to really be an alcoholic. Yes, I could be drinking 24 hours a day, but I'm only 21 and I'm in college, so that must negate all of those facts, you know? You know, I'm telling stories to the liquor store clerk about why I'm buying another handle like the next day, about, you know, another party at my house, and, you know, just all the pathetic stuff. So I did it was an ongoing cycle, you know, leave school, go to rehab. It was all my family knew to do, and I completely get that. And me just being as manipulative as I was, my mom wanted me to go to a sober living after, you know, the umpteenth treatment center. She's like, we need to have some follow-up action. And I remember at the time in our area, all there was this one place that was for like women and children in the sticks somewhere. And I remember telling my mom, like, you know, there's no way. I'm not going to go hang out with a bunch of deadbeat moms and bratty kids, and I'm way above that. And so I manipulated her desperation to just have me somewhere safe, to go out to California, because I was sure that was what I needed. I just needed to be away from the partying at school and develop this new life. I so believed in the geographic change. Like, I knew that was it. I'll go out to California, I'll start surfing, I'll date some surfer dude, it'll all be okay. I just need a different path away from all this. And everywhere I went there, I was, none of that helped. It would help for just a long enough time that I would be like, see, it worked. That was all I needed. Aha. And then it would all blow up, and it was like, oh man, I really thought that was the solution, I went to treatment out there and said all the right things and did all that stuff, and did sober living and all that. I ended up working in a treatment center because I could say all the same, I could regurgitate all the information that I heard. None of it meant anything to me, in my soul, but I could, recycle it. And so I worked at a treatment center, and because I really didn't have any sort of spiritual anything going on, I relapsed there while working, driving a client to somewhere, I don't even really remember, and got a DUI while working, and got spit out of the drunk tank and put back into the treatment center that I just worked at, which was humbling. People told me it was humbling anyway. I just thought it was flat embarrassing. I didn't know any sort of difference between the two. That's just embarrassing. And it's so funny. I was so worried that I was going to say something embarrassing up here, and I was like, it's a drunk-a-log of all my horror stories. Of course, it's inherently embarrassing, right? So that was a pretty big, embarrassing doozy, but that still really wasn't enough. I just always needed some kind of distraction, some other thing to fix me. There was a lot of, I so believed in the rehab romance, too. I was always leaving rehab or sober living with a boyfriend, thinking that was the answer, And I dated some guy for a little while and moved in with him and his mom, and I took a little breather from condescending on his life to go get a second DUI. And and on it went. And then, my mom was always in my corner and was like, we'll try to get an attorney to help you out, which is the last thing. I didn't deserve that, There was no reason to think I was going to do anything different or I was going to change. But I think she just so badly wanted to hope, that maybe if we just cleared up the legal trouble and I got back on the right path, everything would be okay. And so she worked it out with my grandma, got an attorney, and while we were getting me an occupational license and working that all out, I got a third DUI. So that was 3 in about 9 months. And even that attorney, this high-dollar attorney, was like, would be like, you've done it. I don't know what to tell you. Good luck with all that. Enjoy jail, pretty much is what he said. And he was like, I remember him saying something like, that's exactly what you need. And I was like, oh, all this money. And I couldn't avoid the jail no matter what. So I had to go to Santa Ana for all of 2 weeks, which was a trip because I was little pathetic me, and that was a lot of people that were professional jailbirds. So I didn't really fit in great there. If there was one place I didn't really fit in, it was probably Santa Ana jail. That was the one place. I just remember crying for 2 weeks straight, getting all my belongings stolen and just crying more. And it was just sad. And they eventually transferred me to I guess it's called the farm, but it's nonviolent offenders, which is, it was some kind of Girl Scout camp out there. And that was fine and good. And there was always, things were lightening up where I could see that, maybe, I would always say maybe it wasn't that bad, or, I could spin the story. I got out and did county work program and started dating my corrections officer and thought, that's a good solution. That's somebody to keep me in line maybe and straight and narrow, and I'll just go that route. And that didn't work. I was forever getting I'd always pick these guys, right, that were just total saints, bless their hearts, sweet as can be, but just didn't understand alcoholism at all. And so they'd always give me what if you just tried drinking just beer, or what if we just did just the weekends? And I'd be like, yeah, that's a probably good idea. I knew better because I knew the way that I drank, but these poor guys were just tossing out, just spitballing some good ideas, and I was all for it. But then I'd eventually get the tearful, I really thought that I could change this or fix this, and it turns out I can't, the whole I love you but I can't. And I always was brokenhearted, but then it was well, now I can let the charade go. I can drink the way I want to drink. It's probably for the best. And, that would escalate the spiral a little bit. And I always wound up in the same places. And so, I was hot potatoed around my whole family. And I never really thought either about just the mental and emotional position that put them in. Like, that whole tug of war of, like, do I put my kid on the street? Or do I, like, give them this handout and hope that they, for once, don't abuse it, and use it against me somehow? But I did that to my parents, my siblings, and friends, and helpful strangers, anyone I could get a handout from. And always with the empty promises that I'm going to do better, I'm going to do different, I'm going to stay sober, it'll all work out. So my mom took me in at long last, living in Florida. She had remarried there, and, she was always the last house on the block. And so she took me in, and I did the usual, like, would go to meetings and go to work and go to meetings and go to work. And AA was essentially just a place where I would go to tell people that I was going to AA so that they would leave me alone about the whole drinking thing. It was not like something I wanted to, like, be in, like, I wouldn't say I was in AA. If people asked, it was like, oh, I don't know, no, I'm not in AA. That meant something totally different to me. And when people would give me phone numbers, it was like, thanks, like, but I felt like I had to be here, like this was some kind of, like, sentence, and it was like, it's bad enough I have to be in AA, but I don't want to, like, be in AA, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want this to be my life, God forbid. And so, I stayed as on the fringe as I could while still keeping up the appearance of doing things legitimately. And of course, that never worked out, and I always got drunk. And so, eventually I was living in a sober living and waiting tables, and it just blows my mind how much, like, the bar was slowly lowered over time. Like, I remember sitting in a doctor's office when I was 19 and being told, like, this whole you're ruining your fertility. You might not be able to have kids as long as you live. And I remember thinking, even though, like, I'd always dreamt of being a mom, being like, well, maybe that's for the best. Maybe that's not what I want after all. And just kind of, like, tossing out that whole dream because it didn't suit my obsession, And same with alcoholism. Like, I'd gone to college and worked hard. I thought I wanted to go into psychology or get an MSW and do social work. But then when I could just wait tables and get by and drink all night and sleep it off in the morning, I was like, maybe that's a pretty good life. Like, I'm going to settle for that. Like, this is pretty good for me. And so the bar and everything was always lowered. I would just slowly justify these things and opportunities that I don't really need that, and that this is what makes me happy. Being able to drink without consequence, that was, like, the hugest dream to me. That was all I wanted. And sometimes I could get it for long enough to delude me. But when I was 28, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. I had been dating this guy for about a year. And I remember feeling like a teen mom, like, oh my God, like, what do I do? And I'm 28 years old, but I'm like a child inside. And, thought, maybe this is good. This will be my ticket out. Like, I thought this was the answer. It was always something, right? And this kid I put all this pressure into this little tiny infant to rescue me from alcoholism. She had a job from day one. And I really thought that was going to be it. I thought, when she was born, I thought, I love this creature with, like, my whole being, and I would never do anything over, she's my everything. But when it came between drinking or not drinking, and, the choice was always clear. And I just was so floored by that. Like, that shocked me. I had been kind of shocked and disturbed by things I'd done drunk and things like that, but that, like, seeming clear choice of, like, alcohol before my child, and how do I reconcile that with who I think I am and who I expected to be as a mom. And rather than see that as, like, that's the power of alcoholism, like, that right there, that's the power of alcoholism. Instead, it was like, that's proof that there's something seriously wrong with you, and you are, a morally bankrupt, like, beyond repair kind of person. And the amount of, like, guilt and everything I dumped on myself after drinking as a mom it felt like a bottomless pit of guilt. Like, there was just not enough alcohol in the world to make it stop. And so then I was just in this spiral of trying to just get a little bit of relief from that guilt and that shame, but never really getting it, and things perpetually getting worse, and the guilt and shame getting worse, and on it went. I really thought That even when the smoke cleared, and if I did miraculously get sober, that like that guilt and that shame would always be with me, that I would never draw a breath or think a thought that didn't involve that guilt and that shame. It was just constant. I couldn't even fathom any sort of relief from that. And that's like the biggest gift I have today, is like I can be present, and like I can tell my story and all these like scars and everything, and I don't have that same guilt and shame attached to it that I did when I was in it, and it was like insufferable. So it got so bad at that point that I had driven us into financial ruin. We were getting evicted. I was unemployable. My partner was unemployable because he was trying to care for our daughter and take care of me, and there was just no way. And so his mom bought a ticket for him and our daughter to come down here to Prescott where she lived, and I was just gonna have to figure it out. And I remember that was the first time, like I've almost drank myself to death. I had a 0.4 in a hospital bed, woke up, and like the doctor was trying to tell me that like I should be wet brain or dead or in a coma, and all I wanted to do was get out and drink. That was all I could think at the time. I didn't understand the gravity, but I understood the gravity of like my daughter's leaving, and I'm gonna be here alone in this evicted home, and like I was drinking this bad with all these other variables still present, like without those things, with all bets off and nothing at all to lose. Like, I will drink myself to death. And that was terrifying. That was the first time I'd ever even considered that thought, even though I'd already done that. Almost drank myself to death. So I desperately called my mom and worked out for me to get a plane ticket and basically just follow them here uninvited. And I made a lot of promises, like I always do, that I would do this, and I would go to treatment, or I would go to a halfway house, or I'd do all this stuff. And eventually, those things didn't happen. A job was another thing. Like, I really just need a meaningful career. You know, that whole, the ABCs and the, no human power, it took me a long time to really get that. I really thought there was a lot of human power and a lot of worldly things that could take care of this thing. And I tried all of them, like, to excess, over and over, And a big one was definitely like the jobs. If I could just get the right job, I'd straighten out, and then I'd be okay. And so I tried that route. I got a job right away when I got here, and I remember my boss went out of town to his dad's funeral, and I seized that as an opportunity to drink in the office alone. I'm still, as fate would have it, I work for them again now. I have for a couple of years, and so when I don't feel so motivated at work or whatever's going on with me, it's like, remember, living amends. I have to always do my best because it wasn't always that way, and these people have given me more than I ever deserved as far as employers and just sober people, guardian angels, really. So there's a lot of my amends that I don't really get to choose the whole living amends thing, though. Like, I still feel like there's a duty to have a conversation and like let the other person at least explain what they think would make it right. Otherwise, if I'm all in self-will, and it's like, I'll just do better. Like, that's just still me, right? Doing things my way. But yeah, so we moved out here, and I still was in and out. I stayed on the fringe out here as best as I could, despite many of you always stretching out a hand, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad that now I get to embrace that and be a part of like this huge fellowship and friendship here that I tried to avoid for so long. I didn't know what I was missing, that was all, So yeah, I lived out here. I got the dream job by happenstance. I got fired from the one that I drank at and landed at this other job that was beyond my worth, if you ask me. And I knew that, and that was the thing. It was like, okay, I got the thing, right? I got the dream job now. Like, I got the salary, and I got this, and this is supposed to fix it. Like, this is going to fix it. But I knew already. Like, I knew that that wasn't really going to work. And I'm driving to this job every day just, like, full of doom. Like, what's going to happen? When's it going to happen? Like, I don't deserve this job, and even if I did, I have no spiritual means to keep it. I don't know how to stop self-destructing. I haven't stumbled across the answer yet, so this is going to go. I just don't know how and when. And invariably it did. I took a trip to Florida to go meet my two nephews. My brother and my sister both had babies within a couple of weeks of each other, and they were both going to be in Florida, so we went to take a trip. And I remember I had like 6 months sober, and I had it in my head, like, I just knew, like, all right, I'm going to drink, and this is how it's going to go. And it went from like a thought to a plan within seconds, and I didn't talk to a sponsor, talk to anyone in AA. I didn't do anything about it. I just solidified those plans. And I drank on the plane, and it was this whole big nightmare. I landed there. My brother didn't want to see me once he heard what was going on. My sister wasn't quick to the knowledge of what was going on, so I met with her, and she was furious. She had been 3.5 years sober at that point in AA. And so no one wanted anything to do with me, and I was supposed to fly out of the other coast to go back to work, and that wasn't going to happen because my brother was on the other coast, and I'm not going there anymore. So I was like literally completely out of plans. My partner had to fly up and fetch my daughter, who was with me and my mom, and try to bring us both home, and I just refused. It was like one of those things where I just couldn't face the music that time. Like I was down for the count. I just couldn't even imagine like coming back home and coming to face work and face AA, and like I couldn't do it. I refused to do it. And I remember just like screaming, and so I was just belligerent and refused to go home. So I stayed in this hotel all by myself while my plane ticket lapsed to go back home to work, and like drinking away the last of the money I was going to have saved. And I remember just sitting in the lobby like crying, and this guy came up and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, like obviously, look at me." And he recognized me, and he was like, "Are you Nikki's sister?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't think I know you." He goes, "No, I know your sister. She's in AA here." And I thought, "Aren't you in AA too?" And I was like, "I mean, does it look like I'm still in AA, And he was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "I don't want to, I don't want to go into it." And he was like, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I was like, "I don't know, I don't know." He's like, "Well, it's not working, is it?" And I was like, "It's not. Yeah, it's not working. It's not working at all. I don't know how I'm going to get home. I don't know what home is anymore. Like, I don't have any answers." And he was like, "Well, let me take you to this detox." And he works at this hotel, so he's like, "Let me go talk to my boss, and I'll take you over to this detox, and we'll get it all squared away." And it was just so strange. It's just this strange hotel that in the middle of Florida, I just eeny, meeny, miny, moe, the cheapest hotel that I could seem to find for my, to wallow in my despair. And there this guy was, and brought me to a detox and a meeting, and was able to come back home. And I mean, there's been a lot of little guardian angel, just weird, surreal moments like that in my sobriety. Probably, and it's funny, like all the things, the miraculous things I thought I would get with like the promises coming true, they look a lot different than I thought they would. Like my absolute hands down, like if you ask me, like the biggest spiritual like gift that I've gotten has to be being able to be there for the passing of my dad, which wouldn't be the first thing I would have picked, out of a list of wishes and wants when I was getting sober. But that was a priceless moment that I would have never had if I was drinking, because I've had those opportunities. Like my grandparents passing away, my mom gave me a call and told me what was going on. I was drunk in California, and all I thought was like, I need to get drunker. Like I can't even absorb this information. Woe is me. My mom was losing her parents, and it was like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. Everybody's so sad. I need to be drunker, and I'm not going to go back and support my mom or anything like that. That was all I could think, is that I just need to get far away emotionally. I need to get as blacked out as possible to forget what's going on. And so to have this different experience with my dad calling, and we had a very sort of strange and often tenuous relationship growing up, and we had just in the last year or two of his life, probably because that's when I got sober, I had a different perspective of him and a deeper understanding of him, and was able to go there. I mean, that's one of those examples of like God doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. I do not go to funerals and stay composed. I don't sit by dying loved ones. Like I am not the kind of person that you would call upon for like calmness and strength, normally in those kind of situations. But like I got to hold my dad's hand and talk with him when he was still lucid, and like hold his hand while he was passing, which I never thought that would be a moment that I would want so badly. But like to be able to have had that feels like probably one of the biggest gifts I've had in sobriety. But there's been many. I had another daughter who's never seen me drunk, who I get to love with my whole being, and there's nothing in the way of that. It's just a direct line of God-given love onto them, and they don't have to endure any of the ugliness that comes with just being a guilt and shame-ridden drunk mom. There's so much. I really spent a lot, like a good half of my time sober. I kind of was coasting along, and I really hadn't grown spiritually. And that had always been my downfall, was that like I would go to AA, I would go to meetings, I would do step work, like I would do these things, but spiritually, like the connection with God and the true dependence on God really wasn't there. And I was still kind of in that in like a year sober. And what kind of shook me out of that was my sister, who had had 3.5 years, and this was like, to me, she was like the happy ending of AA, right? She had been like a selfish person all her life, and then a drug addict, and then she comes to AA, and she's this like God-loving person, and she meets this man of her dreams in AA, and they have a baby and ride off into the sunset. And I thought, whoa, like that's what like got me sober, was like, whoa, if that could happen to her, we have pretty much the same background and everything, like that could happen for me. And she eventually just kind of stopped doing all the things that we need to do to stay, going to meetings and calling a sponsor. And with 3.5 years, she went back out and was in and out of jail, lost her son. And I remember thinking, like, if she could get sober, I could get sober. But if she could get drunk and lose all these things and lose her children, and like that could happen to me tomorrow. And really, I asked myself, like, what was I really doing to stay away from that? I was going through motions, but that never worked for me permanently. I could do that for a little while, and it just didn't stick. And it just kind of pushed me into action. And the first thing I did was prayed for some direction. And what popped into my head was that, like, I don't know how to find God. I really don't know how to seek. All that stuff's been foreign to me. So what I did was I found a new sponsor who I saw had this deep relationship with a higher power and a full dependence on it through thick and thin, through all sorts of twists and turns of life. And I wanted what she had spiritually, in addition to what she had as a sober woman in AA. And so I changed sponsors, even though I'm like terribly codependent and didn't want to like hurt my other sponsors' feelings, and agonized over that for a long time. Because she wouldn't want to lose me as a sponsee. It would be so tragic. And, she lived, don't worry, she was okay. It was all fine, but that like totally changed. That was like a first instance for me where like I genuinely knew what I needed to grow spiritually, and I actually did it. I didn't run the other way. I didn't try to think a different alternate solution. But I did that, and it was like a link to more direction. And the spiritual work that I've gotten to do with my sponsor has been absolutely 100% life-changing in every way. Like my whole conception and relationship with a higher power has continued to evolve, and now it's finally to that point where sometimes I go back and forth and I take my will back and things like that, but generally speaking, I've finally gotten to a place where like even the really big things I give to God, and I really try to just leave them there, as best as I can, just leave them there. And I heard someone say once, like, to get comfortable in God's hands, and I loved that saying. Like, that's really, like, all we need to do, right? Just get comfortable in God's hands, and to let him do for me what I can't do for myself, because he's done that before, and that's really the only reason that I'm here. The reason I was in and out of AA for 10 years was because I did things my way, and I was just really self-will run riot. I really just thought that I could figure it out. And I'm a smart, capable person, and I never really got past step 2. Like one was clear, right? Life is crappy, it's unmanageable. Alcohol's the problem. I get all that stuff, but I really thought that was where it ended. That you just take the alcohol away, and then I'm a smart, capable person again. It stands to reason that life would become manageable again. And I just operated on that reason, and I don't know. It just never worked, and it took a lot of trial and a lot of error to finally be willing to say, I just can't do this my way, and that I truly need to depend on a higher power if I'm gonna stay here. I don't know. A lot of people ask, like, being in and out for so long. Like my family would always ask, like when I'd come back from a relapse, like, what's gonna be different this time? And it was like I never had an answer to that. Like if I knew, I'd stop coming in and out, right? If I knew the answers, I wouldn't be here. I love that other saying too, like, if I weren't an alcoholic, I would drink all day, every day. It's like, yes, that's what I'd be doing. If I had it all figured out, I'd be drunk all the time, and I'd be consequence-free, and everything would be peachy. But I don't have it all figured out. That's why I'm here, But I really can't say what's different, and if you're new and you've come in and out, a trillion times like I have, or even a couple times, you know, there's not like really for me a clear thing I can point to that I did differently. It wasn't about me really. It was just like they say, to stay as long as it takes for the miracle to happen. I was always leaving 5 minutes probably before it was right around the corner, and I just couldn't hang on. But I just knew I'd always come back, because it was like, I know that if there is really a miracle, if there really is a God and there is a miracle that I'll get sober, it'll be here. It won't be out there doing things my way and running around in circles. If it's going to happen, it'll happen here. So I knew by sheer odds, if I just stay here, sooner or later, you know, something will happen. And I think I just stayed long enough this time. And now it's just about keeping my seat, because I've given it up a lot. So, you know, for me, that's all about maintaining a spiritual maintenance, and it's really steps 1, 2, and 3. That's why I love that beginners meeting. To focus on 1, 2, and 3, and like the ABCs of how it works. Those are the things that I really need to like relive all the time and keep fresh in my mind, because those are the things that I would forget, and I'd go back out to remember that, you know, I'm an alcoholic, and I'll always be an alcoholic. I'm not going to have some life circumstances next week or next year that will change that. Like, I used to go to therapists, and I used to think like, well, never had any trauma, but maybe they'll find something in there, and then they can, you know, expel the demons, and I can go back to drinking, you know, like a normal person, or whatever they do. And they do all this therapy, and it was like, still, they'd always be like, you should go to AA. Like, I think that's your problem. And it was always like, rats, you know. But, you know, I just need to stop thinking that there's some alternate solution, or that, you know, as I see it, I'm an alcoholic and I'll always be an alcoholic, so I just get the choice of being a sober one or a drunk one. And I don't know, I found life to be a lot more enjoyable as a sober one, and a lot more fulfilling. I mean, I look at my life now, and it was like, I had such a full day, and I thought, oh, I didn't even have any time to think about myself and like what I'm going to say when I'm like on stage and all this, you know, woe is me, because my life is so busy. And it was like, it's full of all this stuff with my kids, and I just stopped letting that cycle go on. And it was like, what a privilege. Like, I could just as easily be under a bridge somewhere with a bottle drinking about how bad I miss my kids and how did I get here, you know, just as easily. So, I mean, everything is a privilege, it feels, and it feels like a small price to pay. You know, I come here, I get to receive a whole bunch of love and get to love on a whole bunch of people, which is my favorite thing, and, you know, be in the sunlight of the Spirit, which to me is like a constantly happy and grateful place. And, you know, some days are easier than others, but if I can just stay in that and not be searching for really anything outside of myself other than God, is really kind of the way I keep my seat here. Is when I start to reach for those other things and start to think that they're the solution to all that's wrong with me, I just circle back to God and ask him to remind me or show me what's really important. And usually what happens is little service commitments pop up, or somebody needs something, or just an opportunity that I wouldn't have normally had to be out of my own selfish stuff for a little while. So yeah, it's really been just kind of a surreal experience to be here with all of you, and to look around and like see some people that, you know, I still remember seeing way back then, when I was new and things were really, really rough. So if you're new and things are rough, I promise, just stay here. It's the easier, softer way for sure. And there's a whole lot of love here for all of you. So I love you guys. Thanks for letting me share.
Let's give Jenna another hand, man. You killed it. Great.